Okay, so today we're going deep on something that honestly can be a little bit intimidating to think about, and that's life insurance,
Yeah.
especially after you've dealt with something like lymphoma.
Right.
And we've got some great material to work from today from diversified insurance brokers. And they, um, as you can probably guess, they help people who have some pre-existing conditions to kind of navigate the whole world of life insurance.
Yeah. And there's a lot to navigate. Like, it
Absolutely.
can be stressful.
So, reading through this material, one of the things I found pretty reassuring right off the bat was that just because you've had lymphoma,
Right.
it doesn't mean that you can't get life insurance.
Yeah.
There are definitely some factors that'll come into play,
Absolutely.
but you're not automatically disqualified.
You are not out of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the first things they talk about
Right.
is the type of lymphoma that you've had.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is where they differentiate between Hodgkin's and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Right.
And this is really more than just a medical distinction.
I see.
This is a big deal for insurance companies when they're looking at your application because Hodgkin's lymphoma is generally marked by the presence of these Reed-Sternberg cells. And if you catch it early enough, it tends to have a better prognosis than many types of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Gotcha.
And then when you look at non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, there's a whole spectrum there. And all of those different subtypes have different characteristics and different potential outcomes.
So basically, it's like the type of lymphoma is just like the close layer of the onion here.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to kind of peel back.
Mm-hmm.
And they also talk about staging and grading.
Absolutely.
So can you just remind us what those terms mean in this context? Because I think a lot of people kind of get them confused.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So staging really has to do with how far the lymphoma has spread in your body.
Okay.
And then grading has to do with how aggressive the cancer cells actually are.
Okay.
So you can kind of think about it like a wildfire. Staging tells you how big the blaze is.
Right.
And grading tells you how fast it's actually burning.
Right.
So all of that information is what an insurance company is going to use to figure out, how much risk they're taking on by insuring you.
So it's not just, did you have lymphoma or not?
Exactly.
It's really about all the specifics
exactly.
of your particular situation.
Right.
And then on top of that, they list a bunch of other factors, too, that come into play.
Yeah.
Like the time since you've been in remission.
Yes.
Your treatment history, your overall health.
Exactly.
So where do we even begin to unpack all this?
Well, you mentioned time since remission,
Yeah.
and that is a big one.
Okay.
The insurance companies are really, really interested in how long it's been since you had your last treatment.
Okay.
And a lot of times they're looking for at least 5 years of remission to consider you
Yeah.
a lower risk. That doesn't mean that you're automatically out of the picture if it hasn't been 5 years, but they like to see that time frame.
Right.
Because that generally means that the lymphoma is less likely to return.
Makes sense.
And obviously that, makes a big difference in how they calculate things.
So, okay, 5 years. That's a good benchmark to
Yeah.
kind of keep in mind.
Definitely.
Now, treatment history, I feel like this is probably the most complex
Petrus.
one.
Yeah.
Because there's so many different ways that you could have been treated.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the things that they kind of zero in on there?
You're right. It's a very nuanced thing. They don't just say, oh, well, if you had this treatment, you're automatically out.
Right.
So, for example, stem cell transplants.
Yeah.
A lot of people who have very aggressive forms of lymphoma, they end up getting stem cell transplants.
Right.
That's really important
Yeah.
for treatment. But what the insurance companies are going to do is they're going to want to dig deeper and see, well, how did that affect your health long term?
Right.
Were there any complications?
Yeah.
Were there any side effects that are ongoing?
Gotcha.
So it's really about them trying to understand how that treatment impacted you.
So it's not just ticking a box. It's really looking at the whole picture.
It's really a holistic view. Yeah.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the different types of life insurance policies.
Okay.
Because I always get these mixed up. There's so many different names.
Right.
So the source talks about fully underwritten policies,
Yeah.
simplified issue policies, and guaranteed issue policies. Can you kind of break those down in simple terms?
Of course. I always think about a fully underwritten policy as kind of like trying to get into an exclusive club.
Okay.
They have the strictest screening, the most rigorous health screening.
Right.
But the reward is that typically you get the best rates if you can get in.
Okay.
Simplified issue is more like joining a gym.
Okay.
There are still some hoops to jump through.
Yeah.
They're going to check you out.
Right.
But it's easier to get in.
Mm-hmm.
The train-off there might be that the death benefit is capped, or your premiums might be higher
Gotcha.
than they would be if you were fully underwritten.
Okay.
And then Guaranteed issue is like the public park, everybody can get in.
Right.
It's open to everyone.
Yeah.
But because of that, it tends to be a little bit crowded. And that usually means higher costs.
Right.
And there might be some limitations like a waiting period
Gotcha.
before the policy actually kicks in.
So, it really depends on your individual situation and your health history.
Exactly.
Okay, so speaking of health history, the source gives some advice
Yeah.
for getting affordable life insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things they really emphasize is being proactive
Absolutely.
about your health.
That's just good advice in general, right? It's not just for insurance, but,
For your life in general.
for your life.
Yeah.
Taking care of yourself.
Yeah, so how does that kind of play into this?
Well, so this is where things like regular medical checkups are so important because if you can show the insurance companies, hey, I am staying on top of this, I'm going to the doctor regularly, I'm keeping an eye on things, that gives them more confidence.
It's almost like you're building a case for yourself.
Exactly. You're showing them that you're managing your health
and
trying to mitigate any potential risks.
Okay, cool. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on, the source really emphasizes the value of working with an experienced broker.
Absolutely.
When you have a pre-existing condition.
Absolutely.
Why is that so important?
It's so important because it's a really complex landscape, and having someone who's been there before, who understands the ins and outs of the industry and how to navigate this whole world is just invaluable.
So they can really kind of like advocate for you.
Exactly.
And find the best possible
Right.
moments.
They can help you sift through all the different options and figure out what makes sense for you.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to kind of sum up everything we've talked about, the main takeaway here is just because you've had lymphoma, it doesn't automatically disqualify you from getting life insurance.
Exactly.
Well, there are a lot of different policy types out there.
There are.
They cater to different needs, different health histories. And being proactive about your health can really improve your chances of getting good coverage.
Absolutely. And, all of this leads to one really important question for you.
Okay.
What are your priorities when it comes to life insurance? Do you need a really big death benefit?
Right.
Are you mainly concerned about affordability?
Right.
Are there other factors at play?
Right.
Once you figure out what your individual needs and priorities are, that'll help you feel more confident as you're navigating this whole process.
Great point, okay? And for anybody who wants to explore this further, we have included some links to some great resources in the show notes.
Awesome.
So be sure to check those out.
Definitely.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having you.
On this deep dive.
Of course.
We'll see you next time.
See you later. 7/20/20 boss.